Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here this morning. I'm Kristen Arute. I'm President and Program Director for Hingham Cares. Hingham Cares is a 501c3 nonprofit in Hingham, and our mission is to reduce youth substance use within our community. We are also a federally funded coalition. We receive funds through the CDC through a Drug-Free Communities grant, and we happily welcome generous gifts from businesses and individuals within the community as well. So I would like to first welcome our panelists here this morning and thank them so much for being here. We have pretty much every expert on the subject of youth substance use rules, regulations, laws, and they'll have an opportunity to introduce themselves in just a minute. And I want to thank you all for being here as well. It's nice to have an audience. And thank you to Harbor Media. Sorry, I've been running around all morning, so I'm a little short of breath. I had a printing problem. Thank you to Harbor Media for filming and for live streaming this program. So I would like to get started by allowing our panelists to introduce themselves. And we'll start with Carrie Nee, who is the chair of the Hingham School Committee.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you for hosting this and for inviting me to be part of it. So I'm Carrie Nee. I'm the chair of the Hingham School Committee, and I'm also the mom of a 15-year-old and an 18-year-old. This is my fourth year on the committee, second year as chair. Our role on the school committee is we have three responsibilities under Mass General Law. We are responsible to hire and evaluate the superintendent, we oversee the budget, and we develop policies for the district. So I think all of those things impact with the conversation today. From a budget perspective, if we wanted to implement a substance abuse prevention program in our schools, or social emotional things such as developing grit or resilience in our students, we'd have to find the funding source, working with the administration or advocating with the town. As far as policies go, we kind of come up with the overarching policies of the district. They need to be consistent with state and federal law, and also with what we want here in Hingham in our community. And then the policies aren't worth much unless they're effectively implemented, and that's the responsibility of the superintendent. So you need the right person to do that. So that person will take our policies and then develop procedures and rules, and all the school rules kind of flow from the policies. So that's what we do, and looking forward to hearing from everyone today.
Great, thank you, Carrie. And Jim Quatromoni.
Thank you, Kristen. Thanks for having me here today. My name is Jim Quatromoni. I'm the Director of Athletics at Hingham High School. This is my 5th year. My role in dealing with the student athletes is that we abide by the MIAA's chemical health policy, and we use the pursuit of interscholastic athletics to help young people make good decisions in that pursuit.
Thank you. Rick Swanson.
Morning, everybody, and thanks for the invitation. Kristen, great to be back here. My name is Rick Swanson. I'm principal at Hingham High School, and have actually been in Hingham Public Schools for 15 years, the first 10 as assistant principal, which is really on the front lines of our school's policies as they regard drug and alcohol issues. And for the past 5 years have been principal, and happy to be back here as part of this panel.
Thank you. District Attorney Tim Cruz.
Thanks, Kristen. Thanks, everybody. My name's Tim Cruz. I'm the Plymouth County DA, and I have been for the last 20 years. And normally, I think when you think of the District Attorney's Office, you think of crime and prosecution and law and order and all the shows like that are on television. But we do so much more, and what we're doing here in our community, not just here in Hingham, but throughout our county, is trying to make sure we can help our kids make good choices, make healthy choices. And if they do make a mistake, make sure that it doesn't deter them where they're going to go in their lives, whatever it may be. You know, we're dealing right now, and our kids are dealing right now in such a challenging world, and the issues that are out there, working with the Hingham Police, who do a tremendous job every single day, the Hingham Fire Departments, all the law enforcement and public safety people are trying to keep our kids safe, I think, as best as they possibly can. So, you know, it's great to be here today to talk a little bit about what we do, but I'm really here to talk about the preventative things that we do that you may not know about that I think are really making a difference in our county.
Thank you. Richard Pearson.
Thank you, Kristen, and thanks for inviting me to represent the MIAA. I'm Richard Pearson, Associate Executive Director of the MIAA. Pleased to be back the second time with all of you. Just a real quick thing about my background. I've been in the office for 10 years full-time, but before that I spent 23 years in the schools, 13 of that as a high school administrator. So, and I'm actually on a school committee as well. So hopefully when I go to work every day at the office, I'm here to support the schools and Jim and Rick, but also bring some of my my education and expertise to bear to help our association move forward.
Thank you. Officer Rob Ramsey.
Thanks for having me. My name is Rob Ramsey. I'm a police officer here in Hingham for God, 27 years. My 17th year at the middle school as a DARE/school resource officer.
And Officer Tom Ford.
Tom Ford with the Hingham Police, 15 years on the department, and I'm going, starting next year will be my 10th year with the high school, hitting a decade. So great, it's a great job, and I love working with everyone. Hingham Cares, everyone in the community, and just all working together to help the kids. So.
Great, thank you all so much. So I have a few questions that I'd like to ask each panelist, just for some foundational building. And then if anybody in the audience has a question, we're going to open the podium up to people to come up and ask questions themselves. So why don't we start with you, District Attorney Tim Cruz. If you could describe to us or explain in a little more detail what the social host law and the Good Samaritan law are and the impact that they have on families, in particular families with children.
Yeah, thanks. We often, go to schools, pre-COVID, now we're getting back post-COVID, going into actual face-to-face meetings with parents in the evening and talk about the issues that are going on as pertains to social host liability, because lots of times when we're dealing with parents, sometimes they don't really understand the situations that can happen. Right now is a real great time for boys and girls in high school and middle school. Their proms are going on right now, so it's really an important time of the year, I think, for us to go out and talk about these things. We just did a mock crash in Whitman-Hanson High School the other day of showing the kids what happens when bad decisions can happen. When you go to a party and perhaps you're drinking or things such as like that, or taking marijuana, or whatever the drug may be. But as we deal with the social host issues going on now, that means that if you are providing alcohol at your home, for individuals to drink and drive, or takes marijuana and it's under your control, if that happens, once they leave your home, they still really haven't left your home. Because if they go down the road and if they get into a car accident, if they hurt somebody, and if, God forbid, they kill somebody, not only are you going to potentially be subjected to criminal penalties, which you will be, you will also be subjected to civil liability. And I think that people sometimes don't understand that how big that really is. That it's happened here in our county, unfortunately, a number of times where parents have provided alcohol and they've allowed individuals, kids to drink, and parents always think that they can, we're going to take everybody's keys, nobody's going to ever be in a position that this is going to happen. Let's face it, our kids are all smarter than we are. And they're not going to give you the right set of keys, and they're going to do something else, and they're very bright young men and women. So we have to really watch them, because if that does happen, you will be on the hook civilly for that, meaning they can sue and go after your home. We had a house here right outside of our county, large civil settlement judgment went against those people. They lost everything as a result of that stuff. So from that standpoint alone, be careful for everything that you've worked for in your life, and also let's make sure that we're going to be, to our children, when they're children, parents. Unfortunately, many times we have parents that want to be friends with their kids. And I always say, you know what, I want to be friends with my kids too, when they're 25. Up to that, when they're in my home, when they're 12 and they're 13 and they're teenagers. When you are young and irresponsible, you are young and irresponsible. And kids do that stuff, and we understand that. And that's why we have diversionary programs to help the kids so you don't ruin their lives going into college. If you're filling out college applications now and you look at all this information there, have you ever been charged with a crime? Have you ever been arraigned on a case? All different. But they can affect your ability to go to schools. They can affect your ability to get your license. They can affect your ability if you want to become a tradesman. All those things happen. So understand that the criminal penalties that are out there for providing alcohol to a minors are severe, just contributing to delinquency of a minor. The minors, when they're out there, kids that are under the appropriate age to have alcohol, because the kids work really hard nowadays for their licenses, their driver's license, and it costs a lot of money, as you all know, and also you have a lot of time invested in that also. You also have to go to the classes. If they get arrested for one of these crimes, they can lose their right to operate a motor vehicle. And that sometimes really gets kids' attention, I think, that they're going to lose their license. There's a significant penalty, financially speaking. I think it's $1,000 to get a reinstatement fee once you've done all the things you're supposed to do. We have programs to help the kids as best as we can when they make those mistakes from the criminal end of it, but there are civil ends of it, and there's all sorts of moving parts on this. And also, like you have the MIAA here. Obviously, if you get, and I'm sure these gentlemen can tell you a lot better than I can, there's going to be penalties for their school activities. So all I can say is that, we try to make sure that we can go out and talk about these things to parents, talk about these things to kids, try to give them the best amount of information that they can have to make sure that we can keep them safe and make sure they have a great, productive life, especially now it's graduation time. Hopefully everybody has fun and there's no problems.
Thank you so much. Nice segue into my next question, which is for Richard Pearson. Would you mind explaining who MIAA is, what role they play with schools, and what role they play in terms of drafting policy for schools to adhere to.
I really appreciate the question because I think it's sometimes the most important question to understand who we are and how we exist. The MIAA is an association of member schools, about 377 member schools. The MIAA Board of Directors is actually principals, superintendents, athletic directors. So I actually work at the MIAA. I had more of a voice and a vote when I was a principal that sat as a principal and not a worker at the MIAA. The decision makers of the MIAA are our member schools, the principals of our member schools. So I think what has happened, or clearly what's happened in the history of this organization, is that the member school leaders have helped guide and decide what the best policy and direction is for the use of interscholastic athletics for our children. And I think that's the best takeaway that I can say to anyone, that although the MIA can sometimes be the faceless something in the distance that no one understands, the MIA is grounded in the principals and athletic directors of our schools, and that's how we exist. The policies that are created around chemical health and substance abuse and all the other policies are created by those boards and those committees of our association. So that's who we are. We are, as we would say at the MIA when we talk to principals and athletic directors, we are you, you are us, and that's the truth. That's how it functions. So those policies and things that are happening are all grounded in where we are in schools today. And I think that's an important takeaway to understand.
Great, thank you so much. Principal Swanson, could you please describe how MIAA rules and regulations impact what you see in the schools and the student body and their use of any use of substances within the student body?
Sure. We have policies related to drug and alcohol use that would pertain to all students, regardless of whether or not they're athletes. But for sure, the policies that are voted on, developed at the MIAA level, are among the most significant and influential, in part because so many of our students are student athletes. Our number this year, I think, is close to 80%.
That's correct.
Right, for participation. So we're looking at many hundreds of Hingham High School students who are student athletes, for whom there's an extra reason to make healthy decisions. As a member organization with MIAA, we're accountable to the regulations that pertain to all high schools in Massachusetts, including the potential loss of participation in interscholastic athletics for a student who has used or consumed alcohol, not only at school, but even outside of school. And our policies supersede the MIA policies a little bit to include constructive possession or group possession of alcohol as well, so that students who are student athletes would jeopardize their participation. There's a policy that pertains to all schools across the state where on a first violation, a student would lose the chance to participate in the next 25% of their team's contests. And there's a progressive discipline to that as well, where subsequent offenses would lead to a lengthier suspension. We make a point to publicize those policies, not only in our handbook, but also regularly at preseason meetings, at team meetings, and elsewhere throughout the school, to make sure that our students are well aware of it, and there's an additional really powerful reason to make good choices.
Great, thank you. Jim Quatromoni, could you please describe that channel of communication that takes place? So if there is an infraction, how does one know about that infraction, and what steps are taken after that infraction has been proven to be verified?
So there are a host of ways I think that the information can get to administration, but I think the memorandum of understanding with the police department, where a police report would get to an assistant principal, who then would give the student the right to be heard, and upon having that right to be heard, the consequence would be delivered. I think that there are other ways. If a teacher sees something, if it's not necessarily a situation where kids tell on kids is going to lead to a chemical health suspension. It needs to be a more official identification. I think I answered your question.
You did, yes.
All right, thank you.
Carrie, would you mind describing the role that school committee takes in crafting policy for the schools? So we've got MIAA as a separate entity. What role does school committee play in crafting policy around substance use?
Yeah, so it's similar to any other policy that we develop. We develop policy that's consistent with state and federal law. As far as on this topic, we would look at the MIAA policy and incorporate that into it too. We look at what other districts are doing. We have a policy subcommittee that does a lot of this work, and so they do that. They do the research. They read all the MIAA policies, what other districts are doing across the country, even, and come up with recommendations for the school committee. And before it goes to the school committee, it also goes to the staff. So it would go to Coach Q and to Rick and to the HEA members to kind of get input from that. And once we have all of that, it goes to the committee, and we read any policy at least twice to make sure. So we'll read it once and then wait a couple weeks to the next meeting. We'll read it again, and if we're ready, we'll vote on it. Policies tend to be, for a school committee policy, it's very overarching. It's more of a vision, where do we want it to go? It would be more on the professional educators to come up with the rules and break it down exactly how it gets done. So.
Great, that's good to know, thank you. Officers Ford and Ramsey, this is a question for both of you, because you do come as a team. Could you describe the kinds of things that you're seeing in your respective schools, the middle school and the high school, in terms of substance use among kids, whether it's taking place on campus or off campus, and what some of the consequences are to that?
I'll go first. Middle school, it's actually knock on wood, it's very quiet now. Pre-COVID, we had the vaping started to sneak in with us because it came trickled down from high school with the older siblings. But if they are faced with any type of substance, like I said, the vaping, it's school discipline. The school will handle it and stuff like that.
So I actually did some homework and I came prepared today. So I teach a criminal justice course. I have 25 students, and I said, listen, I'm going in front of a panel on live TV, so you got to help me out here. And so I said, and they're great. We had a great discussion. We talked about everything, and they said, yeah. So we started going through the checklist. I'm like, vaping at the school. They're like, oh yeah. They're like, marijuana, with vape pen, stuff like that. They're like, yep. Said drinking. They're like, not on property, but oh yeah, on the weekends. It really hasn't changed. I think, especially with vaping, because of COVID, I think in talking to kids, it's increasingly being used as a way to cope with their anxieties and to kind of, and tell me if I'm wrong, but like a way to cope with their anxieties and kind of try to get through the day. Same with marijuana. Some kids are just, they use it maybe because of, issues with their medication or whatever. So it's not always just like an issue of like delinquency, but there's a bigger issue here where like we need to look deeper into this. So there are issues, but it's all part of a bigger problem, just from COVID and teen anxiety, and so yeah, it's going on right now. So.
Great, thank you. So since I gave one question to the two of you, I'll give a second question just to make it even-handed. Could you describe your respective programs at the middle school, so the DARE program and the SAD program?
Yeah, the DARE program was actually started back in the mid-1980s in Los Angeles, California. It was an anti-gang, anti-violence, anti-drug. It worked so well there that when it moved across the country, not everyone has a gang problem. Like, here in Hingham, we have the, Nantucket Reds versus the Vineyard Vines, pretty much. And so it kind of morphed more into the anti-drug program, which it still is today, but it's not as much. Now it's really morphing into a decision-based program, because, like I tell the kids in middle school, within, depending on the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, depending on what year I'm dealing with, I go from 1 to 3 years, you're going to be at the high school. You're going to be high school sports, high school activities, and we talk about the penalties that you just heard about. We got on the MIAA, we got on the athletes, and plus at middle school, every kid thinks they're going pro. So that's a huge factor right there. And then again, depending on the age group, I go anywhere from 2 to 3 years, you're going to be driving a car. And I go, depending on the situation, with alcohol and drugs, you're running the risk of losing your license. It's going to cost you and your families thousands of dollars to get it back. And then I go, looking further. 7 years from now, you're going to be looking at schools. And again, the choices you make today affect where you are, 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. And for most kids, it tends to click. The big thing is, I just want the kids to just delay, because they're going to be faced with something at some point. And hopefully they got something going on, whether it's sports, drama, art, whatever it might be. They find their talent, and they just delay experimenting with stuff until they're much older, when they realize, I don't need it. I'm happy with doing what I'm doing, naturally, instead of getting involved with that stuff.
And the program that I'm affiliated with at the high school is Students Against, it used to be called Students Against Drunk Driving. I'm sure that's all what you remember in school. A club that's been a national organization that's been around for years. That has now changed to Students Against Destructive Decisions, because there's so many more issues with kids than just drinking and driving. And I can be honest talking to the kids. Drinking and driving is, luckily for us, is kind of like a frowned upon thing. That they really, it still happens, but they're using other alternatives, which is good, but there are still so many other things that they're engaged in, risky behavior. So what there's a great group of kids that are involved, and what it's really morphed into is looking for outside resources. One of our best allies is Hingham Cares. I know the DA's office has great community programs that we can bring in. We have used South Shore, the South Shore Women's Center have come in and they've done like impaired driving presentations. We brought in people in that have been victims of drunk driving crashes to talk to the kids. So it's become more like community outreach, bringing outside resources in to engage with the students, because I think the students hear from us every day. They hear from Mr. Swanson, myself saying no, no, no all the time. Like, let's bring in like people that have real experiences that can offer real things so that they can actually see. And what the kids told me today is they learn the best not from being lectured, but from seeing what has actually happened. Like, show us what has really happened, and then there's a connection, a much more meaningful connection.
Thank you. So I have a general question for the entire panel, and feel free to chime in with a response. One of the great assets that we have access to as Hingham Cares is the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, which is conducted on a biannual basis by the health department at the high school. And it provides us with a lot of information about usage of substances by youth, whether it's nicotine, vaping, alcohol, marijuana, other illicit drugs. And one of the things that's kind of remarkable about Hingham is that our numbers in terms of parents allowing alcohol consumption on their own property, within their own homes, is kind of off the charts. So what advice would you give to parents with regard to that particular thing? And I truly believe that parents are trying to be well-meaning. They're trying to keep kids safe, and the DA has already referred to, you know, the Good Samaritan, or the social host law, and parents' intentions, but there is a danger associated with that. There's a legal component to it. So what advice would you give to parents with regard to that specific point?
I would say don't do it. Don't provide alcohol to minors. A, it's a crime, and B, there's potentially civil exposure to that. And it's just the wrong thing to do, and it sends the wrong message. Our kids are all watching us. You know, if you, and even if you're telling your kids, don't drink, don't drink, don't drink, and you're drinking, there's mixed messages there. And I think with a lot of these very young, impressionable minds, and that we have a responsibility as adults in our community to make sure that, you know, these kids understand that, you know, that you've got to be safe and you've got to take care of your friends. You got to make sure. I mean, it's a great community here. All these kids know each other. They're probably going to know each other for the majority of their lives, even once they go to school, and they're always coming back for things and things such as that. And that, you know, I always try to stress that make sure you take care of each other and watch your friends. You know, in my job, I see a lot of different things. I've been the DA now for more than 20 years. I was an assistant DA for 4. I was a criminal defense lawyer for 12. So I've been around for a while, and I've been on both sides of the fence. And when I talk to young kids and I tell them about some of the situations that I've been involved in, that I've seen in the court system, and when I talk about those cases where there's horrific incident and somebody gets significantly hurt or somebody gets killed, and you eventually go to court, and you will see in that courtroom, you'll see some young kid, you know, 20, 21 years old, who just thought they were going to go out and have some fun. They were just going to have a drink. They were going to be young. They were going to be out and have a good time. And then something terrible happens, whether they run into another car of somebody who's not drinking at all, or if somebody in their car gets hurt and killed. When you go to those courtrooms, and I think that if any kid ever has an opportunity to go to a disposition in either district or superior court, to watch the courtroom, and you see on one side some young boy, some young girl, crying their eyes out, saying, I am so sorry, I would switch my life with theirs in a second. I believe them. I really do. I think they would do that. And they're crying their eyes out. And you look at that young man or that young woman, and you look at their family, and they are devastated. And then you look on the other side of the room, and you see another family who has lost somebody in their lives, and they're never coming back. There's no coming back from that stuff. The only thing consistent in the courtroom is that everybody's lost. There's no winners there. There's no winners. That's why it's so important, I believe, for us as parents to act like parents and to make sure that our kids understand that we need to be responsible for them and that we're watching out for them. And that's why we can't provide them alcohol. It sends a terrible message and lets them think that, you know, when you, like you said, all the kids think they're going to be professional athletes. All the kids think they're bulletproof. It can never happen to them. That's always somebody else. That's not true. Take it from me, please. When I go and I talk to kids, like I said, I was just talking to Whitman Hanson the other day in the morning from their mock crash, which I thought was a great program. You know, I'm imploring them. I know you guys are going to go out. I know you're going to do some things that you shouldn't do, but please don't do it. Remember, your younger brothers and sisters are watching you. Your parents are watching you. The kids that are looking up to you. Somebody is always looking up to you, and you have a responsibility to them. The responsibility goes down to everybody in our community. And I think we as parents have to make sure we stand up for that. And so if you ever hear of somebody who thinks that they're going to have a party for their kids, or they're going to have, I know there was one school around here a couple of years ago, their prom was in Boston, which I think it was at Copley Place, and I talked to one of the parents after we did a program and talked to the parents about social liability, and a mom came up to me and said, you know, I'm going to rent a room up at the hotel just for the kids. You know, it's just the boys and girls can go in, the parents are going to go in there. And this is after I did all this talking. And she goes, what do you think of that? I go, I think that's a terrible idea. because, like I said, kids are smarter than us. Kids are going to be sneaking things in. They're going to be doing things. You know, we have grad night lives around our communities now where kids have to take breath tests before they go in, you know, to make sure that they're responsible. They're 17, 18, 19-year-old. Their brains are all formulating. Some kids are formulating quicker than others. And that's why I always say to the kids, take care of each other. You come from a good community. Let's make sure that we're not going to a funeral. Because if you've gone to enough of those, you've seen that devastation, and you don't want to go there again. And I know the police don't want to see that, the firefighters, the EMS, all the public safety people that are going out there every night trying to keep people safe. And they do a great job. But terrible things happen. We can try to minimize that. And by doing this, I think by being parents and not pals of our kids when they're young, I think that's step one in making sure we can keep them safe.
Anybody else care to comment? Officer Perry?
I just want to add to that, a message directly to the parents. Every adult in this room, we have a responsibility to develop a kid's moral compass. Like, they learn so much that will follow them to the rest of their life. Like, even to this day, when I make a decision, I see my dad's disapproving face, like if I'm doing something wrong. So I think we need that. We need a line in the sand, all of us, that we're all on the same team, that say, listen, this isn't right. Because when a parent thinks they're doing the right thing and they're given the easy path to the kid, what are we really teaching the kid? There's no sense of like, well, some are telling us this is wrong, but there are some other parents that are telling us this is right. And then when that follows them into adulthood, should I get behind the wheel? Should I engage in these other activities? They were never given the right compass on which way they should follow, what's actually right and wrong. So I think that's all, everyone in this room has that obligation as parents. So.
I agree in both cases. And my advice to other parents, not just from the perspective of the high school principal, but as a fellow parent with 2 high school students who live with me, that I really think it's a poor choice and the wrong choice to provide alcohol for students in your home. And I think in many cases people are too ready to surrender to what they think is inevitable and say, well, kids are going to drink, period. They're in high school, they're going to drink, they're going to experiment. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I don't think we should accept defeat on that. I think there are many good reasons to believe, hopefully, with hope, that students will wait until they're older and that they won't start drinking when they're still in high school. And that as parents, we can do a whole lot better for our kids than to provide alcohol. Let's provide a basketball hoop in the driveway if kids are coming over. Let's provide a ping pong table. Let's provide a movie to watch. Let's provide pizza. Let's provide other healthy ways for people to still come together and have fun with their friends. Alcohol does not have to be part of that equation. And we shouldn't believe that it's inevitable that it's going to be. So those numbers from the YRBS really are concerning to me. And I take great pride in this community as a member of the community, not just as an educator, but as someone who's lived here for more than a decade now. Take great pride in belonging to this community, but that is not a particular point of pride. That's an area where we need to do better.
And it takes a team to do that.
I would echo all of this and agree, and this is a community problem, and it's, the schools we have our policies in place. They have, through the health curriculum, this is addressed from very early ages, but if parents are hosting parties with alcohol or drugs at home, the kids are getting very mixed messages, and it really kind of undermines what the work that the schools are doing.
Excellent point.
And also, it's not just Hingham. I mean, it's all of our towns, it's all of our communities. Every parent, doesn't matter where you live in our county or I think in the Commonwealth, they're all going through the same challenges that we all are, and trying to deal the best we can with our children. So it's not just you guys. You shouldn't think that that's what it is. It is a pervasive attitude, I think, that's across our Commonwealth, and that's something I think that we need to get in front of as adults in our community. And I think that we can do that, and I'm hopeful that we will.
I think District Attorney Cruz said it best. Don't do it. I can promise you that if you're providing alcohol to your child and their friends in your home, that won't be the only time they consume alcohol. You're guaranteeing that there'll be another time, and it won't be at your home. And I know our community is very passionate about athletics. When a young person is dealing with a chemical health suspension and has to be taken away from a team, there are two parts to that can be unbelievably disruptive and distracting. One is that person is taken out of play. That is a huge distraction, and I've watched it over my 16 years as an athletic director just take teams down. And second is relationships with their peers. When there's a party, everybody isn't always caught. And 6 teammates get caught, deal with the consequence, while the other 6 that were just a little faster to outrun Officer Ramsey and Officer Ford are still playing. It is a recipe for disaster for relationships and for dealing with teams. Please don't do it.
Well, that's a great segue into my next question, which pertains to youth. So we just talked about advice for parents and the importance of modeling good behavior and not providing alcohol to young people. What advice would you give to young people if they're at a party, and there have been some recent events where teens have been found at parties, and whether they were or weren't consuming alcohol or other substances, there were consequences to that. So what advice would you give to teens who find themselves in a situation that's a little bit precarious and want to get out of it in the most effective way possible?
I'll take that one because I talk about it every day in school.
Perfect.
Yeah, I tell the kids, first of all, if you know the place is going to be bad news, just don't go. Just avoid the situation, But if you find yourself in a situation, leave as soon as you can. Because the longer you stay, the longer you risk getting in trouble, whether the police are on the way or, who knows what could happen. I tell all the kids to talk to their parents and get some type of a password or a passcode set up where if they're in a jam, they just hit like a quick text to them, or they have a code. Like when I was growing up, we didn't have cell phones, but our code was, I forgot to feed the dog. We had a cat. So if my parents ever heard I forgot to feed the dog, they're like, okay, where are you? I'll come pick you up. Another one of my buddies, real quick, he had a great one where, because we all played sports growing up, and he would, if he ever had to use it, he'd call his mom saying, I forgot to tell you, my practice tomorrow got moved to, and he would name the ball field whatever he was near. That told her 2 things. A, he was in trouble, and B, he knew where to pick him up. It was genius, So again, like I say, talk to the kids and just say, look, get something set up with your parents. If you find yourself in a jam, a quick text, a quick code, your parents can pick you up. And as far as getting out of the house, you can use anything. You say, oh, I don't have any cell phone connection. Let me step outside real quick. I'm not feeling well. I got to get some fresh air. Or you came in one door, go out the other, when people aren't looking. So.
Great.
Yeah.
That's great advice. Anybody else with advice to students who find themselves in situations that are a little bit compromising?
Just to extend a little bit on Rob's point, I think it's smart to leave immediately. If you ended up there, the better solution is to not show up in the first place. If you have any questions, and I think in most cases people will know if they're going to a home that there's likely to be alcohol there. But if truly they were surprised at showing up at a friend's house, discovered that somebody did bring alcohol unexpectedly, my advice to my own kids or to any kids would be to leave immediately. Don't wait. As an assistant principal, I heard, I think this is probably not an exaggeration to say I heard 100 times from people, I was waiting for my ride. And how many times out of the 100 was it actually true? I don't know. But I know nobody ever had to sit in my office if they had left immediately. and everybody's got a cell phone in their pocket to text or call for a ride and say, I'm leaving the house now, I'm starting to walk down whatever street, and parents could be ready to pick them up and to meet them. If you're not there, then you're not going to be in trouble for it. And it's important to avoid it if at all possible, and to leave immediately when you discover there is alcohol on the premises.
I'm sorry.
I was actually just going to call you up, but DA Cruz, could you finish your thought?
No, I was just going to say that I think the kids need to understand that there are consequences at numerous levels, whether it be at the school, at home, MIAA, potential consequences down the road. And it's been my experience, and we deal in our county. It's very diverse. It has urban sections, suburban areas, rural areas, and we were involved in a federal program, an anti-gun, anti-violence program, many years ago, and we were dealing with Operation Ceasefire, which we would go to some of the high at-risk schools and talk to some kids, some tough kids that come from broken homes, 13, 14, 15 years old, and they're all members of like gangs, for lack of a better word. And you'd see these young kids, and the thing that got my attention was you look at these kids, very difficult kids, and but they're kids. And how do you reach them? How do you reach them? And the way that, I can talk, but they're not going to really listen to me. You need to bring somebody in that they're going to have a relationship with. But the one thing that all these kids cared about, it was all the same thing, and no matter who the kids are, they all care about their younger brothers and sisters. They all care about their nieces and nephews. And I think somehow if you can put the spin that, if you do something wrong, not only are your parents going to be disappointed in you, not only are you going to have serious consequences, but also, Johnny or Susie is watching you. And if you go down that path, what's going to stop them from going down that path? I think that is something that makes it bigger than them, because now they're the big brother, they're the big sister, they're supposed to be watching out for these young kids. And to me, that was one thing, like I said, it didn't matter if it was drugs, it didn't matter if it was guns, it didn't matter if it was alcohol. All the kids were the same on that, and I think that's something that maybe we need to focus on a little bit.
Thank you. Yes, please, feel free to come up to the podium. You have some comments to make.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Hogan. I'm one of the adjustment counselors at the high school. I just wanted to add one thing, and it's actually something I didn't think about as a parent. I have older kids now, but the code word is a great idea, and I think all parents should develop it with their kids. And what I recommend parents say is, if you use it, I will come get you. You're not going to be in trouble. We're going to talk about it, right? It's not that there isn't a discussion, but you want them to use it knowing that it's not that it's totally consequence free, but you want them to feel free to call you when they're in trouble and not be worried about the consequences from you. There will be a discussion, obviously. But one thing I didn't think about is, a lot of parents are tracking their kids now on their cell phones. So kids will leave their cell phone somewhere else if they're going to somewhere that they're not supposed to be. They don't have their cell phone, they can't contact you. And so that's just a discussion to have with your kids. I personally would rather have my kid take their cell phone with them, even if they're going somewhere where they're not supposed to be, so that they have a way to reach me. And also, it's just a safety thing, right? If they're trying to hide their location, then we know they're doing something they're not supposed to be doing. So that's just something to think about with the location tracking and having a conversation with your child about that. Making sure they have access to their cell phone and how much you're tracking them and all that kind of stuff. Something I hadn't thought about, but thank you so much.
So I'd like to open the conversation up to anybody who's interested in coming up to the podium and asking a question of all or one or two of the panelists. Looking at a sea of smiling faces. Oh, Nicole, come on up.
Hi, I'm Nicole Bellows. I'm a mom of a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old, and I thank all of you for all your time. You have busy jobs, so to take time out of your days to be here is really important and very much appreciated. And I want to thank Officers Ramsey and Ford, because you've both educated my children, and I really appreciate it. My question is really for Officer Ford, what you said about the kids being anxious and turning to these substances, which I'm sure happens for older folks as well. It's not just in the high school, but that really concerns me as a parent, and I want to know what more we can do to show these children, either through after-school activities or whatnot, that there are alternatives to reaching for a substance to feel relaxed or to feel better. But there's there are so many other more healthy choices. And I'm just curious what the schools are doing, and it's not just the schools because the parents have to do it at home too, but what more can we do to support the kids?
So what I see, and now anyone can jump in on this, what I see is the path to success is, first of all, like a feeling of ownership, like feeling of belongingness in the school, like having something you care about. And the high school is, I mean, it's limitless what you can do in the high school. Whatever your interest is, there's a club, there's an activity, and there's a group of kids that share that with you. I think encouraging kids to get involved in anything, having them also looking at their social health as far as, are they fitting in? Do they have friends? Do they have positive friends? Do they have an adult in the building they trust? It could be anyone. It could be a counselor, a principal. It could be the custodian. If there's just someone they enjoy seeing every day and it gives them a sense of belongingness, it's going to build a more positive climate for them. And so I think you start with that. And then I think communication with your kid is important. And then communication with the school and your resources. The counselors, I can't say enough about the counseling department. I mean, they're really, and I know everyone here would agree, I mean, they have so much knowledge, and you want to know about what your kids are doing, what they're feeling, go see the counselor. So, but it's a great thing that, speaking with the resources, because we see stuff in the building, and I can tell you, it's pretty easy to see when a kid's, like, I can tell when a kid is going down a different path. I start seeing them down the hallway more. I start seeing them leaving the bathroom more. I start seeing them hanging with a certain group of kids they weren't hanging out with before, sitting with a group of kids they never sat with before. So call us and talk to us. And if you have any suspicion or any concern, call us at any time. Say, have you noticed anything different? Because at my end, this is what I'm seeing. And then we can tell you, well, this is what we're seeing in athletics. The coaches know everything. So they can say what they're seeing. So I think the main thing is communication. We're especially, the SROs here, like the last thing we want to do is get your kids in trouble. We want to help you. So if we can help you just observe behavior, we're going to work with our resources and just share as much information as you can. That's a good start.
Thank you. Just one follow-up question. When you see a child who's going down a path that you think could be troublesome, what do you do? Do you reach out to the child? Do you reach out to the parents, the coach, or is it just everything?
Honestly, I usually start with the counselors. And then they say, okay, because usually we have the same opinion. Okay. And they go, well, I noticed that too. And then we go, okay, well, what's the next step? Well, I think, I've already, and the counselor always said, well, what would you do if I went to you and said we might have?
We would usually reach out to the kid. I mean, someone who has a relationship with the kid.
Yeah.
And usually the counselors, someone in the counseling department has a relationship with almost every kid. So we decide whoever is best to have conversation and check in and see what's going on. And, sometimes, if a kid admits that they're using marijuana or whatever, and we try and assess, like, is it for a coping mechanism? Like, what's the driver? Because if they're using it to treat anxiety or whatever, then we have a lot of conversations with them about what that looks like, why they're doing it, what are the alternatives. And I'm really honest with kids that, like, it's really hard for you to believe me because I know it does help you in the moment, right? It does help them in the moment. So to say, stop using when it's working, we have to really educate them when it does help in the moment, but it actually makes your anxiety worse. When you're not using it, it turns into a habitual thing. So I do a lot of education with kids around that, about what the actual impacts are, even though in the moment it is actually doing what you need it to do. That there's a lot of and kids can notice it after a while. They will start to say, you're right, I get it, so, and then the biggest thing is helping them replace it with positive coping mechanisms, and really coaching them and teaching them skills and having them practice. And as parents, my advice is, if you catch your kids or you suspect your kids are using something, ask them why, right? It's what's the driver? Is it because there's peer pressure to do it? Is it because they're feeling depressed? Is it because they wanted to see what it was like? Once you know what the why is, then you can support them around it, right? To just say, well, don't do it, well, that doesn't really help them, right? Because there was a reason they made that decision in the moment. And it was the right decision. It was the right decision for them in that moment for whatever reason, because they wanted to fit in, because they were feeling super anxious, whatever. So you have to, if you approach it from that angle, I think communication opens up a lot more.
I'm grateful for your answers. Thank you so much.
And
Could I just add something too? You mentioned coping mechanisms, and that's been a big focus for the district, starting from a very young age. They put in a toolbox program where kids learn different coping mechanisms to deal with anxiety from a very young age, and that will be expanded next year into the middle school as well, and to try to get that so that the kids hopefully will have the tools they need to prevent, so they won't feel that they need to go to substances to solve their anxieties.
And could I also say that, we've been, in the county, we've been dealing with a lot of different issues as pertains to kids who, we started out 20 years ago, kids who witnessed violence in their lives, domestic violence, whatever the violence may be, and trying to get them resources and help them. And we've morphed now to where we're at countywide, although we don't have all the schools on board yet, but we continue to work with them, trying to make our schools trauma sensitive. And the way that we've been doing that, we've been dealing with kids who are either drug endangered kids, in other words, the kids who are watching their parents who are using, and that's legit, even though, the numbers here in Hingham are way, way down, comparatively speaking, to the rest of our county. Our fatal drug overdoses in Hingham, there's been one in 2019, one in 2020, one in 2021. Which is great. We have other communities here in our county, the number is 42. I mean, there's a lot of terrible things that kids are seeing and kids are dealing with in their lives. And now you take COVID and throw that on top of it. And now you've got kids with mental health issues, and a lot of the times it's untreated, it's undiagnosed, it's unmedicated, and now you have kids who are acting out and doing things because they're just growing up kids. So how do you get in front of that? And that's something that we've been trying to work here in our county for a number of years, trying to make sure that we can break cycles, whether it be cycles of domestic violence, cycles of child abuse. I mean, we have a children's advocacy center here in Plymouth County that last year we had 1,000 kids who were physically or sexually abused. How do you make sure that those, even if you can't prosecute a case, how do you make sure that the kids who's the victim today isn't the perpetrator tomorrow? You get them the help and the resources that you can. And we've been working with all sorts of groups, Brockton Area Multi-Service, which has been great getting resources to children. And now we're dealing with going to schools and talking to schools and teachers and custodians and everyone. How do you figure out a kid's got a problem? We just dealt with an emergency room physician at Brockton Hospital, Dr. Dan Muse, who told you for years and years he didn't know what certain signals were. Kids were coming in, people were coming in, they were hurt, he would treat them, but he was missing some of the signals. And he got trained on some of these issues, and now he knows what to look for to make sure that you can help these kids, help these people who need it at the most. And many times they're children, many times they may be seniors, and they don't know what to do. And if you're a grandparent, and if your child is addicted to drugs and perhaps are overdosing in front of your grandkids, that's what's known as an adverse childhood experience. And more kids that get the more adverse childhood experiences you have, ACEs that you have, the more likely it is you're going down that road also. How do you stop that? That's what's important to me. If you're stopping cycles and getting resources, training the teachers so that if a teacher knows what to look for a high at-risk kid, and making sure they can try to help that kid, and if they can't, they know where to send that kid. They know they can reach out. They have an avenue to go somewhere. And that, to me, is a big reason why we've seen a real positive effect in our numbers on a countywide basis going down. That works, but it's a lot of work for everybody. And I think that it's something that we need to continue to work on here. We are learning every day. I'm just a lawyer. I don't profess to be an expert in virtually anything else, if I'm even an expert at that. But I am good at getting people together who understand the issues, and we have a drug abuse task force. We have a group from legislature, from school teachers, universities, faith-based, bringing people in, trying to figure out the issues as best as we can, get smarter people involved, going to the schools and dealing with the kids themselves. And then when you can do that, you can help those children, and you can stop that, and you can watch your numbers go down. I think we've seen that happen here in our county, and I talked to other prosecutors here in Massachusetts and across the country, and a lot of them are imitating as to how we're all working together here in Plymouth County. And I attribute that to a lot of really good people, the Hingham police, all the fire, first response, all the cops, all the firefighters. They're working together. I mean, they get a bad rap right now, but I'm telling you, 99.999% of them are good people, and they're trying to do the right thing for our kids, and I think that they are. And I appreciate the work that they do, and I appreciate that I'm able to amble on like I am. I'm sorry, Kristen, I know I've been talking, I don't want to take over, but I have a lot to say sometimes.
Oh, that was great. You always have something valuable to say.
I might add one piece.
Yes,
Maybe
go
I
ahead.
use my principal lens as well as my MIA lens, but I think creating responsibility and value over time is of extreme importance. I say from the office, we use the vehicle of interclass athletics to teach and grow the leaders of tomorrow and the children of tomorrow and success in the future. And if a message of responsibility and value can be taught and supported from the beginnings of sport participation or activity participation. Responsibility to others, I think Jim tried to say it when he talks to kids. I used to say as a principal, I think a decision to drink and drug is very selfish. Because as a member of an organization, whether it be the student council, the band, or the sports team, you have a responsibility to someone else. You're responsible to other people. And so I think putting that message of responsibility out in front as early as possible of the why we're doing A, B, or C, I think is important because we can come back on that, right? We can come back if we have to redirect a student or a kid who's having struggles, we can come back to what's the value in being part of this organization? What is the value of being on the sport team? Right? And there's value to that, right? And the value to kids is different. It might be popularity, it might be great success, it might be a college scholarship, whatever it is. But if we have this understanding of value and then responsibility to that value, then maybe that's how we pull them back too. So now the conversation becomes a little deeper, And that's not simple to do with kids, right? But I try to create value with my daughters. I had one that was a musician and one that was an athlete. And I think they had value in both of those things, so that my conversations with my wife's and I conversations would be about that. Why are we doing this, and what do you need to do? Why do you have to wake up in the morning and go to school? Why do you have to pass that test? Because there's value in passing the test. You have a responsibility to get grades, and there's rules that give us that foundation. But there's value to it that's personal. So I think if we push that, individually, I think that's very helpful as well.
Great. Jim Quatromoni, I have a question for you. So in August, you do like a workshop or a program for all athletes that are going to be involved in athletic programs at the high school for the upcoming season. Could you speak to the component that has to do with substances and substance use and the consequences of that? I'm assuming that there is a component of that to that program.
Sure. It's actually a preseason meeting, a workshop for each season. So the August workshop is just for the fall student athletes.
Oh.
And we have a winter,
Thank you.
a winter and a spring workshop as well. And in each of those workshops, we start as a group in the auditorium with parents and student athletes. And we have one particular group of captains with one of our teams talk about the chemical health rule at each one of those events. And then at which point the time the auditorium is over, you go to team classrooms and meet with your coaches, again, with parents and student athletes, and coaches will talk about team rules and philosophy at that time. And often I think the bulk of the work that's done in influencing positive decisions is done when the team's together, not necessarily in that classroom, but just touching upon philosophy at that time.
Carrie, could you describe the sort of cycle that the school committee goes through in evaluating policies? I'm assuming there's a little bit of a structure to it, and I'm assuming it's also a behemoth task to undertake, so it's not like looking at the entire set of policies all at once. So what is the process and procedure that the school committee takes?
So we're actually developing that right now.
Okay.
For the last year, we updated our policy manual. It really needed to kind of come in line. There were certain policies that the state requires us to have, or the federal government requires us to have, so we had to make sure we had those and that they were consistent and in line with best practices and what we want to see in our schools here in Hingham. So this year, so we have a brand new policy manual. It's on our line, or online, hinghamschools.org on the school committee page. And so what we will do is systematically go through every year. It would be the policy subcommittee that does that work. And goes through. We also get updates from the National School Board Association and the Massachusetts Association of School Committees. Sometimes they'll have templates that they'll send us, and we'll look at it and see, is this something we want to use, or do we want to tweak it, or no, this doesn't really apply. So we'll just kind of go through all of those, and then also keep an eye on what other districts are doing. Sometimes something will happen in another town, and we'll look at it and say, oh, okay, we could see this potentially happening here. Let's be proactive about it and put a policy in place there.
just to get a little more granular for people who don't understand the process, how do people get appointed to the policy subcommittee, and how often does that subcommittee meet?
So the chair appoints all the subcommittees, and so people, when, after each election, there's one coming up in a couple of weeks, the people will, on the committee, will just put their preferences in, and it's, policy, it's particular work, and it's not everyone's cup of tea, so the people kind of self-select for that, and I'm on it, and we meet a lot, because there's always something coming up. Redoing the whole manual, that was a ton of work, so we met probably weekly for a year. Now it's not quite as often, and it depends on when things come up, but I'd say every 2 or 3 weeks we do. And it's always posted on the Town of Hingham website too. They're all the meetings are open to the public if people are interested, so.
Mr. Swanson, you have been incredibly supportive, not just of the SAD program at the high school, but also of Hingham Cares and the things that we've proposed to bring into the school in terms of programming. And it was actually your idea to do a Hingham Cares Day, which we're holding on May 18th. Could you describe, I could certainly do it, but I would love to hear from you. Could you describe what that day is all about and sort of your motivation for suggesting that?
Be happy to, and you're very generous with your description, Kristen. I think you should take full credit for envisioning that idea as well. But we're really looking forward to the first of what I hope will be an annual tradition of a Hingham Cares Day in the spring at the high school coming up in a few weeks. It's on May 18th. The timing is great. I think spring is we're coming into prom season, and there's generally a sense of it's time to party and have a good time, and trying to keep all of this in perspective for our students. A good time to offer some programming for our entire student body. And with the help of Hingham Cares, an organization that has proven to be really a valued and excellent community partner for us at the high school in lots of different ways. Because of some grant funding that Hingham Cares had available, we'll be able to offer 4 different grade level assemblies so that we'll reach all 1,200 students at the high school throughout the course of the day with unique programs for each grade. So it happens to be an MCAS day. The sophomores will be taking the math MCAS in the morning. In the afternoon, they'll have an opportunity to attend an assembly. Throughout the morning, each of the other 3 grades will have an assembly as well. And they will look at issues related to alcohol, also vaping, also drug use, and a series of speakers and documentary films that have been vetted both by Hingham Cares and also by our health teachers at the high school. So we're confident it'll be really meaningful programming that will resonate with our students and make an impact on them and help to direct them toward healthier and better decision-making as they go forward.
Great, thank you. Yes, we're really looking forward to that. Richard Pearson, could you let us know if MIAA, do you collect data on substance use trends statewide, things that you hear from schools? Do you collect any of that sort of anecdotally or from a data perspective?
We don't collect it ourselves,
Okay.
and the biggest reason that is because the schools manage all the chemical health policy. I've already mentioned that we are Association of Member Schools. There is not a mandated reporting on the chemical health violations. The rules are clear and readable and understandable, and all of our school leaders understand those rules and administer the rules in their schools. So it's really on them to administer it, and they collect all the data. I am aware of the Metro West surveys. We also have a wellness arm of the MIA. We have 5 pillars of educational athletics that builds what we do for students in our schools around the Commonwealth, and one of our pillars is wellness. So we do have a wellness person in our office that works on that pillar, and so she is engaging with the Metro West surveys and other entities around the state to offer different activities for our students. It could be student leadership activities that we do, could be decision-making activities around this, and we do offer the services to our schools in that regard. But we don't collect the data specifically from the schools.
Okay, great. And DA Cruz, we had already talked about the social host law. You've given a lot of detail about that, consequences. Could you describe what the Good Samaritan Law is?
Well, the Good Samaritan Law is applicable in some limited instances. So if somebody is, say, people are using drugs and somebody overdoses, what's been a big problem in the past is that people get scared and they take off because they're afraid they're gonna call the police and they're gonna show up and they're gonna get charged with possession of that drug or whatever it may be. If they gave it to somebody, that can be construed as a distribution or a delivery, which is a whole different offense. And same thing with alcohol. So if something happens, and trying to get the word out to people, if something terrible happens and kids are using or people are using, don't run away from somebody who needs your help at the time that they need it the most. Make sure that you make the phone call. Call 911, call the police, call whoever you need to call, and know that as pertains to at least to that drug or alcohol right then and there, you're not going to be prosecuted on, all right? There may be other things that happen down the road, but right now, for that right there, those people are going to be safe from that event that occurred. That's what's really important, I think, because we've seen all too often, especially with heroin and fentanyl and the other insidious drugs that are out there, people are leaving and people are dying as a result of that. I think that the Good Samaritan Law, and I don't have any numbers for you, but I think that has been a very positive thing in trying to help people. And if you know anybody, and I think most people do know somebody somewhere that has a loved one who is addicted to that terrible drug that's out there, the opiates that are out there, I think we could all agree that we would all do anything to save the people in our lives. And we want to make sure that if somebody relapses, if somebody's out with their friends, and it's the same thing. Everybody knows who the players are. Everybody knows who, if you're out with these people, what those people are doing. They're not playing sports, they're doing something else. If that happens, you would want those people to help your child and give them an opportunity to save their lives later on. There's nothing I don't think is more devastating right now than what's going on with those drugs that are out there. And, as you watch, fentanyl, which is so much stronger than heroin, and heroin right now, back in the 80s when I was a young prosecutor, the street level of purity of heroin was probably 20% pure. Because what the dealers would do is they would take what's known as cut, inositol, vitamin B substitute, and they would make more from less. If you purchase heroin today, it's probably 90 to 95% pure. And then you're talking fentanyl on top of that. Fentanyl is a synthetic opiate that's developed in China and is coming through, unfortunately, through the southern part of our country right now. And it's coming in here. You have fentanyl, you have carfentanil, which is an elephant tranquilizer. We have ketamine, which is a horse tranquilizer. And there's another kind of opiate coming up. It's down in Washington, D.C. right now. I can't say the name because I can't pronounce it, but it's a long name, and it's another form of a drug that's out there that's stronger than fentanyl. So therefore, we need to make sure that if people are using, and if you, like I said, if you know somebody that's using, they'll try very hard to get off of it, but it's something that it's very, 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 very difficult to shake, if possible at all. They will do anything to get those drugs, and you continue to see, and the police officers will continue to see, that if somebody is hooked on that drug, they will do anything to get the money that they need to purchase the drug. They will steal from their loved ones, they will steal from their families. It's a terrible, terrible situation. So there's the whole crisis going on right now, the opioid crisis, the fentanyl crisis, it is such a big problem. And the aftermath, like we spoke about earlier, being drug-endangered children who are watching these things going on, those kids who are that next step away from it. We have a lot of work to do as a society, I believe. I think that the Good Samaritan Law is a good step in the right direction, but the big step is how to, and I appreciate Hingham Cares and all the other groups who we're working with here in our county. There's a whole lot of really good people who are working really hard on this, and I could only imagine what our opiate fatal overdoses would be if it wasn't for those groups and agencies who are out there every day trying to do their job, whether it be Plymouth County Outreach, which is go on PlymouthDA.com. It's a great program that our police do here, and making sure that we can help the people that need to be helped and save their lives. I mean, that the biggest detox we have in Plymouth County, it's the Plymouth County House of Correction. So we need to get more help for people. We need to get more mental health places for people to go. We need to make sure that people get treated and medicated. And the criminal justice system that we all see every day is the depository of mental health and drug issues. And many times it's ill-suited to deal with them. So we have to get in front of that before people get into that system. And I think that we've made some great strides here, and I appreciate all the work you're doing here, Kristen, and all the other groups are doing here. But we have a long way to go. And I'm very appreciative of that. And I think that, as we watched our numbers going down, we were talking before the program started, Plymouth County Outreach, our numbers have been going down for fatal opiate overdoses here in the county of Plymouth until COVID. And then when COVID happened and PCO, police couldn't go back to the houses, we saw our numbers spike up again. And now, last year, they went back down again. So last year we had 130 32 fatal overdoses, Plymouth County. Those numbers are down significantly, and they're down because of a lot of people who are working hard at this. And I think that if we continue to do that, we're gonna be able to drive the numbers down even more. But all this other stuff, all that we're talking about, there's a lot of moving parts. And it's gonna take a lot of people to doing their jobs and all these various MIAA, school committees, schools, agencies that are out there. That's what's gonna make the difference. And I think, like I said, I think you should all be proud of the work that you've done, because I think you've made a significant difference already. But the road is long, and it can blow up on us at any moment, so let's persevere. And like I said, anything on our website, PlymouthDA.com, please feel free to take it. No pride of authorship, take the whole thing. It's been happening across the country right now. A lot of things we do, I talk to other DAs, what they're doing. A lot of the district attorneys are trying to be front-end people before kids are getting into problems. So I think there's a lot to do there, and I think we're on the right road.
Thank you. So, just about ready to wind down. I just want to make sure nobody else in the audience has a question. Yes, come on up.
Hi, my name's Tara Healy. I've got a 13-year-old son and a daughter who's 12 in the middle school, and then I have a second grader. I ran into a parent a couple months ago who was kind of new to Hingham, and she had some older kids in high school. And she had questions about what there is for teens to do in town. She knew about the Shipyard, the movie theater, walking around downtown, walkabout at Derby, Chipotle, all those sorts of things. But she said, is there a place in town that teens can go on a regular basis where they can do those things that we talked about earlier, play ping pong, pool, hang out with their friends, shoot some hoops? I know we've got a lot of resources in this building, and I know we have a little room that my younger kids went to with some games and mats. Seems like it's geared more towards elementary, but is there anything for teens on a regular basis?
I would say that Rec Center is one downstairs. It's used by younger kids, but also by teens too. The gym downstairs, regularly used by people, in the outdoor spaces as well. The roller hockey rink, the outdoor volleyball and basketball courts out there are frequent gathering spots. Happens to be on the same acreage as the playground, where kids who are much younger are coming as well. But those are places too that are good gathering places for healthy activities for teens. Very common ones you've listed as well. I think the Shipyard, Derby Street, elsewhere. The life at the high school is pretty robust as well. I think you would find the high school campus to be an incredible hub of activity almost any afternoon or evening, whether it's coming to participate as an athlete in a game or as a performer in a concert or a play. There's an incredible amount of activity that is happening at the school. Club meetings as well, before school, after school. Our building comes to life by 7 o'clock in the morning. This morning there literally were about 100 students in the auditorium an hour before school, and I'm sure that tonight you'll see the lights on the Turf Stadium till, I don't know, 8 o'clock? 8 o'clock tonight. And so there's 13 hours of things happening. For teens at Hingham High School, the opportunities for their involvement are really extensive. That meeting in the cafeteria or the auditorium this morning with student council, I saw a whole bunch of kids walking off to an art club meeting at 7:15 and a whole bunch more heading up to the library for a 7:20 meeting of the Global Citizenship Program. And kids were literally streaming into the school at 7:15 and going off to all these different places. And when the school day is over, we'll see a surprisingly small number of students getting onto school buses. Buses that can hold 45 will probably have 15 or 20 kids on them, because even though they probably were quite full in the morning, the majority of students will be staying for something after school. And in some ways, I'd love to see those school buses totally empty at 2:45, and every kid has got someplace to go. And it may vary day to day. Nobody's gonna have the time to belong to all 50 plus of the high school's clubs, or however many. What, do you know the total number of teams right now?
Total number of teams, 56.
Yeah. So if you add the teams and the clubs together, there are more than 100 opportunities to be involved in something that's organized. But I think what you're getting at also is, what about when it's Friday night, or Saturday afternoon, or Saturday night?
The risky nights.
Yeah, the risky nights.
And I think her point was she was kind of new to town, and you get a fresh eyes on something, and then you talk to someone who's been here a while, and you think, wow, that's a really good point. I hadn't thought of that. And she said, we've got all these buildings we're going to be investing in, new buildings, renovating old buildings, all very needed. But she said, what about the kids? We have schools for sure, but is there a need? And I don't know the answer. I mean, people who have lived and worked in other communities and talked to friends in other communities, is it viable to have a place, it could be in Town Hall, where you have, you have the basketball court there, you have a game room, maybe some couches, maybe a food truck comes by, and, a couple times a month you do the food truck out in the parking lot. Maybe you've got the juice guy come by, and the kids can sit around, they can play foosball, they can play games. And strikes me as it would be pretty inclusive, because whether you show up with your friends to meet other friends, or maybe you're just on your own, and you're kind of looking for some belonging on those nights when you didn't get invited to the party that you shouldn't be going to anyway. It just seems like there's an opportunity there, and I mean, you could even get the kids involved entrepreneurially, and they could be running the juice bar or things, but have we ever thought about doing something like that? Does that model even work in communities? Would the kids go to it? Maybe they start when they're younger and you have like middle school night, and then by high school they're already used to it and it's fun and it's cool, and maybe where you have it matters. But is that something that everyone's ever, I'm sure it's been brought up, but is it viable? Is it something?
Well, that's something that we've been talking about doing, as a matter of fact, at Hingham Cares. So we just started a Parent Partners program, and there are a couple of parent partners here in the room. And now that restrictions have been lifted and things are open up, we're talking about doing some kind of a coffee house or a gathering place for kids on a Friday or a Saturday night. We'll start off doing it on a monthly basis and then see where it goes from there, see what attendance is like. One of our board members is Reverend Acela, who is the pastor of New North Church, right across from the statue of Abraham Lincoln downtown. And they have a beautiful ballroom upstairs with a stage on one end, a funky little nook on the other end. So we've talked about doing, pizza there, or a movie night or something like that. So it's in the works.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
I have a second question, totally unrelated to that one, if I could. This is kind of a sports question, I guess. We talk about how important it is for the kids to have that sense of belonging, and they get a lot of it on their sports teams, and Hingham's a big sports town, and all the kids are really excited about that in middle school. And I'm hearing these stories of they get to high school, and they try out for sports, and they're done. They don't make the team in 9th grade, and that's it. And these are kids that are still growing. I mean, they're not even close to full size, skill level, everything. And there's other things they can do, and that's part of life. You're not always going to make the team. But, when we were kids, we made the teams pretty much no matter what. You might be on JV as a senior, but you're still able to play. And maybe that's not realistic, but for 9th graders to say that's it, your basketball career is kind of over, and in high school, in the public school, strikes me as really kind of a lost opportunity to keep them doing something they love that takes hours out of their day, that keeps them with their friends. We talk about the importance of, telling the kids don't specialize, play all these different sports, but if they don't specialize, they're not going to make the team in 9th grade, potentially. So we're sending kind of mixed messages of our own as adults. And I went and saw that great film a couple years ago before the pandemic, where Wayne Gretzky and I think it was Jerry Rice were talking about the importance of, not being a specialized athlete and doing all these different things, and how all our programs should be encouraging that. Yet that's not kind of what happens. We all watched the film and we all thought it was great, but then afterwards we all go back and it's the same old thing. And these kids, they feel pressure and they just want to play. They want to have fun, and they're doing what they love, and the parents are loving watching them. But then it can all get kind of cut off. So I'm kind of wondering, has there ever been, I know it costs money, obviously, to have another staff person, but have we thought about that angle maybe as a way to kind of keep kids doing something they love, who may still turn out to be, varsity players someday if we give them that little extra chance, but if nothing else, they're a part of a team at a really pivotal point in their life, where otherwise they might get discouraged and they might turn towards something that we don't want them to turn towards.
It happens. It happens. I'd just like to start with that. But I will tell you that there are I'm thinking as you're talking of freshman teams that cut. There are very few. I think, without looking, I would say the number might be 3. And we work hard with those kids, and it's part of the process with those kids. Every season, we have no-cut options available. It might not be the sport that, as you've mentioned, that they want to participate in, but they do have an option to get involved with another program without a tryout. So if a freshman tries out for the basketball team, doesn't make that team, that freshman then can go to winter track, if they're interested, to the crew off-season workouts, with having missed several days in pursuit of basketball. There are implications with adding teams based on we were just talking about this prior to the meeting. There are Title IX implications on just adding teams. You have to go through a process. You have to make sure you're in compliance with the OCR with that. Boys basketball is the one, I think, that really we could use probably 6 teams with the number of kids that try out. I think girls volleyball is starting to get to that place as well, where we could probably go to 5 teams if it's a tough problem to have here, where there's so much internal competition and there's so many kids interested in participating, and we'll be pretty close to 1,000 kids that will have participated in athletics before the end of this year. We just try to encourage those kids on 2 levels, I think, to answer your question. Encourage those kids to go to a no-cut option and talk to those kids about what they can do to improve, to potentially come back the next time around and maybe make a team. That does happen from time to time as well. I'm sorry, I don't have I really want a nice, sweet, positive answer to you, but it's one of those things that does happen, and I have to own it.
Not to go too far down the rabbit hole, but what determines why one sport might be cut versus not cut?
Roster spot.
With football, like, not everyone's playing per se, but I guess the concept is that they're still able to practice, like, so who?
Right, so roster spots in numbers. I mean, there is a number, if we got to it with football, that we would have to cut. It's just that number is so high, you don't normally get to it. A basketball team, 15 kids is about the right number. Anything over that, those kids aren't getting into games. You can't manage a game. Your kids won't be able to play. You have one coach typically with a JV or a freshman team managing that many kids. So there are some kind of accepted numbers of roster spots with each team. On those freshmen and JV teams, often we'll go a little bit over those numbers to keep kids around. I don't think it's a firm number here, especially if there are 3 kids. Let's keep them around. And we're mindful of that idea that it's more important to keep a kid around than cut 1 or 2 kids. But often the number is up in the 15s, 20s with some of the programs that I've mentioned.
Thank you for the questions. Any other questions? Yes.
Kristen, I just wonder if I could speak up for 1 minute.
Sure. Can you come to the mic?
My name is Rizzo. Thank you. I work for State Senator Patrick O'Connor's office, and he wanted to apologize that he couldn't be. He really wanted to be at this meeting. The drug issue with him is very huge. Okay, I've known Patrick since he was a kid. My wife and I, we live in Weymouth. We have 6 children, and so many things that were brought up here. DA Cruz, some of the things you said brought back so many memories of the things that we used to talk about. My kids are all in their 30s now. My youngest just turned 22 the other day, but my 5 older kids are in their 30s. And just thinking back to some of the things you said about, not being their pal, being their parent, and just the importance of a lot of that. It brought back a lot of memories. Some of the things that I used to do with my kids, it used to embarrass them, but I used to make them take the drug oath with their friends. I'd go pick them up from the movies, and I'd make them all, they'd all get in the car, and whichever one of my kids I was picking up, they'd say, "Dad, don't do it." And I'd say, "What are you talking about," right? and then as soon as all the kids got in the car and they'd said hello, I'd say, "Okay, everybody, this is a great time to take the drug oath." And of course, we'd all laugh and would make it kind of funny. Everyone would put their right hand up and repeat their name, and each time we would go through it, it would be a little bit different, okay? I promise I will never touch anything or take anything that somebody tries to give me, because I know it's going to change my life forever. And then the conversation would get serious. I'd say, "Okay, you guys, look out the window, right? You see the street lights are on, we're driving down this street, my hands are on the wheel, and we know where we're going. I'm in control. The first time you take something like that, it's one and done, okay? No longer are the streetlights on. You're off the road. You're going down a dark road. You don't know if you're gonna go off a cliff or hit a tree, and you're out of control. And that's the way it's gonna be for the rest of your life, because you've changed your life forever once you've done it that one time. You know, like I say, I don't mean to sound like I am, lecturing about this. This is it just made me think back to some of the things I used to do with my kids. But some of the things that I find very concerning today, number one, we used to hear about a war on drugs. I haven't heard that term in a long time. Is there a war on drugs? You know, the topic came up about the fentanyl and everything that's coming through the southern border. What are we doing to stop that? You know, you don't hear about that. And the other thing that really scares me is the accessibility of the edibles today. You know, you have an older child, they have their friends over, and, you know, they're 21, they're legal, okay? They're eating some of the gummies and having a good old time. Now, they go home, they go to bed, they leave the candy on the counter. Now, the younger sibling wakes up and starts taking that, all right? And what is it gonna do to their brain in that developmental stage if they eat a lot of that stuff, okay? A story came across the news a week or so ago. I forget what town it was in, but it caught my attention because it was exactly what I was talking about. These kids got a hold of some edibles. They were in the 7th grade, and the parents were all up in arms. It was at a house party, you know, where these kids got a hold of this stuff. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up, and again, I didn't mean to carry on, along with the meeting. I know you guys are dying to get out of here, but I just wanted to share some of those. It brought back so many memories of the things that I ran through. I've been to a lot of your programs, Officer Ramsey, and I think the world of what you're doing. We had Officer Bowen in Weymouth years ago. He ran a wonderful DEER program, and then the police chief at the time didn't think it was worth the money spent. In my mind, if that program saves one kid's life or one kid from going on drugs, worth every penny spent, you know. But anyway, I wish you guys the best with your kids. They grow up awful fast, so stay on top of them. The other one thing I wanted to mention is you're not a successful parent until one of your kids says to you, I hate you, because you wouldn't let them do something that they really wanted to do, and you know it wasn't gonna be a good thing. So I'll just end it with that. All right, thanks for letting me speak. I gotta get to another meeting.
Okay, thanks.
Take care, everybody.
Either I hate you or you're the worst mother in the world. So I just want to make sure that I give a plug to our event on the 18th. So when the kids are seeing programs at Hingham High School for Hingham Cares Day, we're going to be offering those same programs here. And we did have this one advertised for the room next door. So it's either the room next door or this room that we're going to be in on the 18th for parents and community members. And I would highly recommend you attend. It's a full day affair. So we have 9 to 10, 10 to 11, and then we have a break, and then we resume at 12:30 to 1:30, 1:30 to 2:30. 4 different programs, and I'm sorry I don't have the calendar right here in front of me, so I don't recall, but it's on our website, so take a look at our website. But the freshmen are seeing a program called Taking a Toke, which is a documentary about the dangers of vaping, perfect for that age group. Sophomores are going to hear Kathy Sullivan speak. She's the mom who lost a daughter to alcohol use. The juniors are going to watch a film called If They Had Known. It's a documentary about a young man who died after consuming Xanax and alcohol. And the seniors are going to hear from a mom who's a nationally recognized speaker who lost her son to, he committed suicide after becoming addicted and hallucinogenic from taking high-potency marijuana. And he started taking marijuana to lose point at the age of 14, and he tried it at a party. An older sibling had a prescription and was sharing it with the younger sibling and the younger sibling's friends, and this young man became addicted to it, and he took his life when he was 19. So it's not alarmist to say that these things are dangerous for our kids. So in the interest of time, I would like to wrap up by offering our panelists an opportunity to share one final comment. We're all talked out. Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
I'll say something. Just to the parents out there, I just ask, we're out in the community, all of us, just ask, let's try to model some good behavior. When the athletic director asked me on a Friday night, hey, you want to work an event? I get a little anxiety, and not with the kids, because the kids are amazing. But when I have to have parents dump cups and dump beers and they're tailgating, it's just not a good look. And here we are trying to set good examples. So here in little leagues having like tailgate parties and youth football, like let's be better, and like if we can help in any way, let us know. But that's what I'd add. So.
Great.
I would just add, everything that was said about what Hingham offers to keep the kids engaged and involved, that is a cornerstone of what we do in education, involved in the school community and being part of it. And that's really the most important thing we can do is keep involvement up. The final thing I'll say, because I have a national perspective opportunity, keeping things in perspective are a great idea as well, too. So, students that go on to further athletics is a very, very low percentage. 7.5 million athletes in the country. There's different state data out there that says 92% don't play again. And some data points are higher. So I just mentioned that because it's involvement and engagement, right? If everyone gets involved in something, engaged in something, and just keeps it for that reason, maybe keep the stress and anxiety down, it'll just keep the whole package together. It's not just for one thing, it's for being part of a great school community.
Have fun, be safe.
Very nice.
Agreed, and a special thank you to all of you for being here, showing your commitment to this, and for those who are watching at home too. It's an honor to partner with you in this really important work.
Yeah, I'm very thankful for the opportunity to be here and to talk a little bit about this topic, and hopefully a message can be sent loud and clear to the community on where our priorities lie.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. Thank you, Kristen and CARES, for doing this. And as DA Cruz mentioned, it's a long road ahead. So just thank you to everyone for all of your work to make progress.
Excellent, thank you. Well, thank you again. This was really terrific, and we look forward to sharing it. Harbor Media has live streamed it, they filmed it, and we'll be sharing the schedule on our social media platforms once it's made available. So check out Hingham Cares on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. We have a YouTube channel with some really great videos, and we also have a website. So thank you all so much for being here. And take some literature. There's literature over here and literature from the DA over there. Could I get a picture?
Yeah.